Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. I'm Kyler Cheatham. I am honored to be guest hosting here on Christy Barber Live to talk about some technical debt. This topic is really relevant, especially today, as we see, kind of the birth of many different technologies in your stack. Really understanding what technical debt is and why it's really hurting your bottom line, especially as a small to medium sized business. So today we'll kind of be diving into that subject while taking your questions or comments as well in the comment section. So just real quick, some logistics on that. We will see whatever you're dropping in the comments wherever you're tuning in from. So LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, all of those channels, your comments are aggregated here. And the cool part about these conversations that Christy and I have is hearing the insights from the audience and really hearing your answers to the questions and all of that too. Because technical debt, I think it's kind of a buzzword, but it's super important when it comes to what actually you're spending on technology and more importantly, why. So with that, Christy, welcome to your own show.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So if you could, can you just kind of give us a little bit of like a layman's terms definition, no fancy buzzwords around what is technical debt and why is it really critical to consider, especially as an SMB, small to medium sized business?
The tech debt, it easily can go.
Yeah.
It's that cost that comes up when you're trying to take shortcuts, when you're duct taping systems together, when you are maybe not updating to the most current version of your software, you're skipping writing down processes of how it all works. And so that kind of just leads to everything being manual, the outdated systems, or even sometimes I see with just over customization because people didn't really understand how
Mhm.
something worked or they want to adapt it to their process, and it's all this over engineering and you've spent all this money for what?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a lot of what I see show up.
Yeah. Absolutely. So basically, when we're looking at this question here, how do you define technical debt in plain English? It really is unique to the organization, but it's basically what system are you paying for in your technology stack that you're not using? Especially in today's world of SaaS licenses, where you're in a subscription model, no matter if you're using the software or not. It's really, really critical to have that audit behavior in your overall kind of just accounting or financial health. So that's kind of how you explain it in plain English.
Plain English, yeah. And
Right.
even I did this with a client last week. We did an audit of every system that they're using and wanting to know, do we really need this? Is the team really using it? Because they had 4 or 5 different AI tools just handling one particular thing in their organization. And it came down to, oh gosh, we didn't know we had this because the teams weren't talking to each other and utilizing the same tools. And so that really helped kind of narrow down what they were spending money on.
Yeah, so critical. And there's another layer to technical debt, which I think is always important to measure. And it's why it's slowing you down. Does Donna from operations need to talk to 4 different managers to add a new drop down into the system? And what does that approval look like? Believe it or not, we still see many clients that utilize things like wet signatures, especially in the SMB world or in our public sector friends. And so that piece we really need to understand. Yes, there's a level of debt there, but there's also huge inefficiencies that you need to account for. How do you quantify that, Christy?
Yeah, I think it's tricky because some of it comes into the culture of how the business runs.
Mhm.
There's certain control factors in there. To your point, you're like, oh, well, Larry over here oversees all of this and nothing happens unless he approves of it. So, Donna over here wants this added and she can't because he's on vacation and nobody else has the rights to touch it because
Right.
that's how it is. And it's kind of silly. And I understand roles and responsibilities and tools and things like that. But that sets things back because now it's inefficient and it's something that's so easily can be done, or even setting up somebody's new login or whatnot. They're like, well, congratulations, you just started working here, but so and so is on holiday, and we'll get you an email address next Tuesday.
Yeah,
That
right?
works out.
And I don't know how to do
Yeah,
that or get
you
you
don't,
into the
yeah.
system.
And I think the other biggest thing too is the mindset behind we'll fix it later.
Mhm,
Just work around this right now, we'll fix it later.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so having kind of that catch-all system, especially for SMBs, where we're asking those questions and where there's a culture that it's okay to ask those questions.
Mhm.
A lot of times, someone sees, Barb from finance coming down the hallway and they're like, oh no, she's going to ask me all these different questions. But reframing that to saying, well, thank you, Barb, for keeping our company healthy and knowing that we have to acknowledge these things. A lot of time I see technical debt, I mean, especially with our bigger clients that I service, um, is the transition to the cloud. And I wonder if that's something that you see a lot too in the SMB community, is just a misunderstanding that even the moment you sign on that dotted line, even if your implementation is going to take 2 years, you are being charged that day for that type of service. And I see a lot of confusion around that in the marketplace.
Yeah, I do too. And it's a lot of it's just it's not communicated clearly that it's going to take so long, you're going to be paying for something that you're not really using. So many SaaS for small businesses plug and play. You sign up, you put your credit card and you're ready to use it in an instant. And this just doesn't. And that makes it a little bit difficult for small business to understand, hey, this is going to cost us a lot of extra money. We weren't ready for this. And that's where it comes down to having those open conversations with your vendors, having somebody like myself come in and help consult and show you along the process to make sure that it is not taking all of your money or even not understanding the plan. I think we lost Kyler, but we'll keep this going a little bit of just around how all of this works. Here you go. You're back.
Hi. Sorry, I was lost in the cloud. I just got like there
It's
was
all
so
good. It
much.
happens.
You know who has a lot of technical debt is me with the terrible internet providers. But that is a whole nother. Like we're over here having robots make, chips in dark factories, but we can't figure out Bluetooth and internet.
Oh, I
I
know.
right.
Or
But
even
as
cell phone service too.
I
You would
know.
think there wouldn't be all these zones, especially in large cities too, of
Yeah.
how many times I've had phone calls drop and I'm like, "Really?"
But yeah, I think back to it, I could hear you. So I thought, that
Good.
was an amazing answer. And kind of looking at it from how you balance that. I like this question from YouTube is how can teams balance cleaning up technical debt while still trying to grow and deliver on their roadmap? And this is so hard, especially for SMBs, to balance actual spending with innovation.
Yeah. And I think too, it's that whole team effort. How on board is your team with the new thing that's going to be coming? And interesting enough, I was at a conference last week where we just talked about all AI in accounting and how there's so much change management in that within your team because you have some people that are like, yeah, let's go. This is awesome. Others are, I'm not sure I want to learn this or whatnot. And I think that kind of comes to this too with that tech debt of how are you collectively going to clean this up? Because you have some people that are very married to certain systems because they know them well and they don't want to maybe get rid of it or merge it into another system. They're happy with 3 platforms and a spreadsheet to answer a basic question because they know how it all works. And that's something that I've, seen pop up a lot. But then I think you have to remember at the end of the day, you know, they are employees, they're human beings, they have to all collectively work together and get them on board to grow towards what the company's doing. And I don't know, I'm big with over communication in organizations. I've been around a lot of companies that are too secret, and it causes a lot of distrust within the members that work there.
Mhm.
And I think when you are cleaning up technology, it's very personal a lot of
Mhm.
times,
Mhm.
and organizations need to speak to that.
Yeah, especially in an SMB community where many of those they brought in the technology, right?
Yeah.
It was their project. There's a bigger emotional connection to that than a 30-year-old green screen that nobody works in a Fortune 100 company. But I think that that is so critical to really understand what does your team want, not just how do you spend less money. Because even if bring in a really efficient AI accounting program, being able to activate it and having your users actually adopt to it is a totally different ball game than looking at something that is going to be forced upon them.
Mhm.
And that's not going to be helpful. And it's going to cause a lot of, process or change debt that we're talking about. And speaking of different types of debt, this comment on LinkedIn, what's considered technical debt in our current code base or systems? So this is another understanding of what is, I call it data debt. You could call it code debt. You could call it many different things. But when we look at the code level technical debt, and I'd be interested to see how the audience defines it and how you defines it. But that's kind of our hard coded values or those duplicated pieces of logic. And we see this a lot with outdated libraries or frameworks. And the inconsistent naming conventions is a big challenge. And that's where we see things not be able to utilize emerging technology like AI because they have so much data debt that they cannot move through in order to get these types of systems to operate the way they need to operate. So that's a great question.
It
Anything
is.
to add to that,
I would just
Christy?
agree with you on the poor naming conventions. That's huge, where there's no structure, and I see that a lot with small businesses. Is they started one way, then somebody else came into the position. They kind of changed things, but they may
Mhm.
not have gone back and done prior. Or if there is a cleanup, somebody comes in and it's like, "Hey, I have this grand idea. We should do this," and it's the worst idea
Mhm.
ever sometimes. And then you're going backwards because, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, none of this makes sense. And that gets tricky. I've seen and I've
Yeah.
experienced multiple times.
Absolutely. And when we're talking about, as Christy mentioned it, architectural debt, that means when you're over customizing something. And a lot of times that can happen with small to medium sized businesses. They can be sold this customization or custom integration by their system integrator, and they don't realize that they don't own that customization. It is owned, the IP is owned by the system integrator. So
Mhm.
the only way they could ever stop paying the system integrator is to break their own integration and figure out how to do it themselves. And that's what we call vendor lock in. That's the sneaky part about being in the software space. Because again, I always say I can't think of another business model where we blatantly fool our customers or lie to them except organized crime, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of times that's what they're trying to do is try and trick you into never being able to stop paying them. That's their business model. So, especially with SMBs, that's why you need someone like the team at Christy Barber Consulting to come in and be like, hey, for this, we don't actually need what off the shelf is 80% there. We're good, but if we need customization, we need to do it a different way that we actually own, not somebody else.
Yeah. And I would say too, I've seen a lot of people, they forget to read the fine print in their SaaS contracts when it comes to intellectual property. And that's a great place to negotiate because you're never going to own the code. So, how do you get them to maybe do all of that design work for free because it's technically using your data to do it? I've worked with clients on that where we get the vendor to do all of it for free essentially, or pay for a huge chunk of it if it is something, because it's their IP and now they can go make money off of with other people. And then making sure, sometimes that you even have the rights to always use it without paying for it in the future with license
Mhm.
structure. So there's little things, but I think people forget about intellectual property. It kind of just gets glossed over. It's like, oh, well, yeah, we'll just add this to the system because it helps us. But to your point, it's
Absolutely.
like you have no option to take it. You don't own it. And most of these systems are locked up, and you can't get the open code source to do anything with it.
And I would argue that that is the number one cause of technical debt is not understanding your total cost of ownership. And you
Yes.
have to go in it with eyes wide open. It is not to the software vendor's benefit for you to understand the total cost of ownership because they're going to throw in things like 50% off licenses for the first year. That's awesome. That's very cool, right? And they're going to pressure you to sign in a certain timeline so that you can get this screaming deal, right? But that is for the first year. How much is this going to cost you for 5 years, 10 years, especially if it's a core piece of your operational system?
Mhm.
What does that look like? You need to do the boring, non sexy work and really look at that. Spreadsheet it out if you need to. It doesn't have to be fancy, but you absolutely must understand that, or you're going to be overpaying for something that you're not using. And understanding that that can actually sink a small business. It
Mhm.
really can. Technology does it all the time because they bit off more than they could chew on the implementation, on the management side, all of those different pieces and what it comes down to.
Yeah, buying modules or, parts that you don't need, advanced modules. And I think the other thing too, like in the spreadsheets that I help with my clients when we're looking at, well, hey, what is your total cost of ownership? We're looking into where will that kind of break even point be where we start to make money off this investment? What
Mhm.
year is that? Is that year 5? Is it year 2? What does that
That's
look
great.
like? And then putting in those contingencies as well, but building in of, hey, I know that when I start down this run of implementation, I might need XYZ. How much money am I going to put aside just in case I need that up front, and building that into your overall scope and balance or a budget to what goes into this project, because it's so easy to go sideways. It's like customizing a car. You're like, oh yeah, I'd like this package. You're like, cool. Well, since you want that, you got to get these other 12 things and you didn't plan for that. So
Mhm.
a lot of that comes into play.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that again is so critical. Get someone to help you with that.
Mm.
Just to take a call out for these amazing questions.
Yeah, these are all really good today.
I don't know what everyone ate for breakfast, but these are very, very good questions. I just want to remind you that we will always go back in and answer those. And Christy often does small video responses to them. So definitely keep them coming. Um, so let's pull one here. In how does tech debt accumulate in projects? And I think that is actually a very interesting way to look at technical debt because looking at it from a project standpoint is really important to understand the balance between what are we spending and what are we getting. From a basic ROI standpoint, as Christy just outlined, you can look at this is how much it costs, this is how much ROI or how much time it's going to take us to get our return. But projects are a whole different ballgame. So, for example, you have to look at the how and the why these buildups of debt happen. And a lot of times, those are going to happen because of, and Christy, let me know if you agree, poorly managed
Yeah.
projects. And I don't say that from anyone being nefarious or lazy. You do not know how to manage these types of projects if you've never done an ERP implementation before. There is no other project like a digital transformation in existence. And it takes a very skilled in this area, project manager, to really understand that. So, just to give you an example of how technical debt can accumulate on a project level, we're looking at things like rush timelines,
Yeah.
delivery pressure,
That's the
especially,
biggest one I've
yeah,
seen, the rush
yeah,
timeline. We want it done yesterday. And
especially in SMBs. And obviously, you can speak to that, Chrisney.
oh my gosh, yes, because recently I had that with somebody like, "Oh, this should take you about a week." I'm like, "Are you kidding?
Are
Like,
you
no,
actually crazy? So,
this will be at least 6 months on
yeah,
a good day, and that's if y'all are working together. If your team can't show up, we're looking much longer than that." And I think too with the speed thing, to them, speed is money, and I get that. But they want to do the quick fixes. They want to duct tape. They want to have workarounds. And then you go right back to what you just walked away from. You already had a system that was duct taped together. You had workarounds. You were always just like, oh, just put it in Excel. I'll figure it out from there. And because a lot of companies can't change their mindset on that, then they're moving back and they have a new system and they're like, let's just go, go, go. We have our roll of duct tape and we're ready, and then it hasn't even helped you. You just wasted money.
mhm,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think, again, one I would put for S&B, and I was actually going to say this is number one, but you let me know what is actually number one because But I think for S&Bs, the evolving requirements
Oh,
is
yeah.
so very tough for them because they sit down, they're like, no worries, we know what we need. We need these 5 things. And they don't want to spend a ton of time on requirements because it sucks and it's really boring and it can be expensive, right, to pay a consultant to go through all of your system requirements when you're the CEO and founder and you think you know everything. And a lot of times requirements are a different language, right? They are completely different in the way that you need to do that. And so all of a sudden you start down the software selection process and then you're like, oh, well, we actually need A, B, and C. And you're like,
Mhm.
okay, Richard, we talked about this in the beginning. But you didn't want to invest in actually sitting down, letting us talk to your team, getting a list of requirements. I can't tell you how important that is and how much time and money that wastes.
Oh, yeah, it's cheap insurance too, because if you don't have somebody that's really going through your requirement list and helping you understand what you really need, it's like even with my clients, I'll go in and I ask very specific and strategic type questions to get the answers that I know we'll need for these requirements. And if you don't ask those, a lot of times you just end up with a system. You don't end
Exactly.
up with everything that's right, or you're getting things you don't need because the shiny object glasses come on. You're like,
Mhm.
ooh, this is pretty over here. Let's sign up for this. But requirements are so, so important, and not just looking at present state requirements, but looking future state. What does your business need in the future, not what it's doing today? Because if we just focus on everything today, then you're going to outgrow it as soon as you put your credit card in and start paying for it.
Absolutely. And a lot of times you don't need a lot of that. And I think the thing that confuses people is they think that like they need robots on their shop floor because they're going to be the technology of the future.
Yes.
And you don't realize like when you look at the most successful companies in the world, that's not how they operated when in growth periods, especially when they were moving from a small to mid-sized business to a global entity. That was quite literally the last thing they were doing. What they were doing is balancing a little bit of innovation from a process and people standpoint, letting the technology support that, right? The technology was not leading the charge. That never happens. And that's never a good idea, right? The people and the process and the
Yeah.
strategy.
And the strategy, yeah, that's the biggest part of it. And sometimes one or both of those kind of they don't weigh as heavily as they should.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see. Let's do this one's really good. How do you guide clients through cleanup when they realize the vendor oversold what the software can actually do? So, like we always say the most important or the most expensive part of projects are the
Mhm.
renegotiating, redoing them because once you sign, you sign. And so, what do you do in these situations where you come in? Because often you come in when an
Yeah.
implementation is in trouble And so what do you do?
First thing is I kind of go back to the starting point just a little bit and talking to them about, all right, let's go through what were the requirements that you had for this. If you have a list, can I read through it? If you don't, let's just do a really high level of understanding how everything works. And let's see how what you have been doing with your implementation, how that fits into it. A lot of times I've seen there's a breakdown in processes that it wasn't communicated in the beginning how things
Mhm.
were going to flow. I had
Yeah.
that with a client a couple of years ago. They were about 6 months into their implementation and got a phone call and they're like, hey, this is not going right.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, let's see what's going on. And,
Yeah.
you kind of lift up the hood on the car and you're like, oh, yep, I can see.
I
And a
can
lot of
see.
theirs was it came down to the requirements and not
Yeah.
understanding the processes of what they really need. And
Mhm.
vendors, to our point, we've talked about this a lot, they're just there to sell. They're not out to, be evil in any way necessarily. They're there to sell, and it's up to you to have done your due diligence. They're not doing it for you. And
Absolutely.
with
Yeah.
these guys, it was uncovering other things that they needed to do that they hadn't had those questions about.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's only so much you can do in these situations, unfortunately, right?
Mhm.
And Christy and I have both done expert witness work because of our provider agnostic stance in the marketplace. So we've gotten front row seats to see how bad this can quite literally get when we're talking about things like litigation. So if you take nothing else away from this conversation, have someone review your contracts and your total cost of ownership. If
Yes.
you do nothing else, please do that before you sign any sort of agreement. It could make or break your business. I'm not
Mhm.
being dramatic. I'm being so serious.
Oh, yeah,
So,
you don't wanna end up in court. You don't wanna end up giving the phone call, of, "Hey, our implementation's going south. We need help." We want you to be set up for success, and I
mhm,
think that's a lot that can happen, and you need to know those requirements. You need to know your contracts. There's so much hidden things in there that having, just somebody in the industry that knows it and then having a law firm review it that is familiar with SaaS
mhm,
contracts. I'll take a little rabbit trail on this just for a second is I've had clients that they use their, legal team that's on staff. And a lot of them have had no experience with understanding and reading
mhm.
SaaS contracts. And so therefore they can't provide good feedback to them. And I have no legal,
No.
knowledge or anything like that. I've just read enough contracts to know a handful of things to look out for, and they've even missed those on the legal on their team, and so I'm having to send notes over of, "Hey, I'm not legal, but here's things you need to look out for." That's really, really good. So I would say always make sure you have a good legal, team or a lawyer that can come in and help you read these that understands the SaaS language and how they do their contracts.
Mhm. Absolutely. And SaaS is still, a relatively new understanding for internal counsel. We
Mhm.
even say this to our Fortune 100 clients. You have an internal counsel of 50 people. If those people have not read SaaS agreements before, then it's not something that is as simple as redlining a legal contract. I also don't want you SMBs to freak out and think that you're paying someone $250 an hour for a SaaS contract. Go ahead and make sure that you talk to your consultant or your transformation coach, whomever's helping you through this, and let them know that, hey, I have this contract. I'm not feeling comfortable with it. And let them take a look. Like a
Yeah.
lot of times you don't necessarily need someone who is in that space, although a final look of it is always um, a good idea, but your consultant can really help you get you to a place at least where you're understanding some big red flags that you might not understand.
Yeah, especially if you're doing a lot of customizations and you're having a lot of other software come in and plug and play with everything, then it's really good to have that good understanding of what's going on because it can get tricky in that respect. I've seen that, where then having a legal team really read through it, or there's different IP issues or whatnot. That's where you kind of need some expertise, or your company is going to be sold, or you're going to be buying somebody and there's a
Mhm.
merger coming. There needs to be special language in there in your SaaS contract, and that is one thing for SMBs. Know that you can add legal verbiage to these
Mhm.
contracts that is in your favor as well. It's not just one-sided.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
And
Because I
that
think
is
a lot of people,
big.
especially vendors, are like in the sales, like, I don't see a lot of these
Mhm.
contracts get negotiated. They have no idea what the contract gets
Yeah.
negotiated, nor do they have any idea what that means. So
No.
don't let them scare you into thinking that you can't change it. So let's take one more question, Christy, and then we'll kind of wrap up this conversation and go. We always go back in and answer these, and we always appreciate. I know Christy looks deeply at your feedback around what can be most valuable in these conversations, especially for you SMBs, because the goal here is to take our time to make sure that you are set up for success. So let's take Avery's question here: is how can businesses utilize AI tools to help with these strategies, or does AI increase technical debt in the long run? Very interesting
Yeah.
question. I'll let you go first.
I think it's interesting with all the AI out there. I think it's kind of like when we all first moved to cloud, we just want to try a whole bunch of different things and not necessarily understand how it works. And all of a sudden, you get a lot of different subscriptions, or you get half baked solutions that aren't really doing what needs to be done. And therefore, you start getting that tech debt coming in. um and it's just, yeah, I don't know, that's what I've seen, or starting to see at least. And I think businesses can even utilize AI to help them understand what debt is going towards their tech, because it can read, spreadsheets and all these things. You could even build something out and then have AI read it and help you come up with a good strategy of, what do I need to do with this? How can I better utilize it? Do I need to get things, do I need to get rid of certain things, and what that looks like?
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think the answer to this question is it totally depends, but
Mhm.
scrape away the AI, right? Think about asking this question: is how do businesses utilize tools to help with these strategies, or does it increase technical debt in the long run? Take AI out of the conversation, start with your audit, look at what you have, and then think about how can I be most efficient in looking at these things. And as I always say, the coolest AI I see in our system architecture work doesn't have anything to do with robots or drones flying around the manufacturing floor. It has to do with things like automated monitoring or quality assurance or logging alerts, those types of things that will help you to organize that data debt we talked about in the beginning, to call out, I have all this data, I let my AI scan it, right? And it shows me where it needs to be fixed. But most importantly, if you see AI as a solve as opposed to a tool, that is a dangerous way of thinking.
Mhm.
That's going to lead you to overspending on tools that you're just simply not ready for. And that, as an SMB, can come with a lot of shame in that conversation. But that is not shame. That is smart to know, like, we're working towards this step, but knowing that we're not there yet is so much more strategic than buying something that you're not ready for.
Mhm. Exactly.
Excellent.
And
Well, this,
that's a lot with small businesses too,
yeah.
because they wanna stay on the cutting edge. And I have this a lot of conversations with my clients on this, like, "Oh, well, so and so is utilizing this, and it's great for them." And my thing too is, does it make sense for you? Is it going to actually produce what you need and all that? Like, forget about the cost of it. Is it going to do what you need it to do? And I think that's what's gonna start coming up more and more, and especially as you can create additional AI agents and all these different things that you can start building with
Mhm.
various AI tools. How is that going to work? And is it worth it to spend time and resources on something versus using AI in a totally different way?
Yeah. Again, you got to know your business first, and
Hmm.
that's going to come from the basics of auditing, of financial structure, of governance, not drones flying all around your shop floor. Okay.
No,
So that's where those good disciplined behaviors come from. That's how these businesses succeed. So this has been an awesome conversation. You guys were so
lots of
great
good
to show up this morning.
questions.
I know. So we appreciate all of these great questions. As a reminder, Christy goes live. I know she's got some killer guests coming up every Monday. So be sure to follow her or subscribe to her channel so you can get that notification. She also is active on a lot of different social medias. Her TikTok is heating up if you want some of these additional kind of little snippets. And I know her DMs are always open to, and she's always happy to help the S&B community. So with that, thank you so much for these amazing questions. Thank you, Christy,
Thanks.
for sharing your insight. And we will see everyone next week. Have a great Monday, my friends.
Thanks.